Have you ever noticed how much noise fills our days? The constant hum of notifications, the endless scroll of social media, the background chatter of news and entertainment. It's almost as if we've become afraid of the quiet. We surround ourselves with sound, believing it keeps us connected and informed, but beneath that surface, something else is happening. Our inner world grows more cluttered, more unsettled, and we rarely pause long enough to notice. The ancient Stoics saw this pattern long before smartphones and 24/7 connectivity. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Nowhere can you find a more peaceful, less busy retreat than in your own soul." He wasn't just talking about physical quiet, he was pointing toward a deeper kind of silence, one that lets us listen to our own minds. For the Stoics, silence was never empty. It was active, it was purposeful. It served as an early warning system against mental weakness, a way to detect fear, anxiety, or distraction before they could take root and weaken our resolve. In a world that praises constant activity and external engagement, the idea of turning inward can feel counterintuitive, even uncomfortable. But what if that discomfort is exactly where strength begins? What if, by embracing moments of quiet, we're not withdrawing from life but fortifying ourselves for it? This isn't about escaping reality. It's about meeting it with clarity, presence, and resilience. Throughout this video, we'll explore how silence acts as an ancient alarm system, one that helped Stoic philosophers cultivate presence, practice detachment, deepen self-examination, and build unshakable resilience. These aren't abstract ideas, they're practical tools as relevant today as they were 2,000 years ago. We'll look at how intentional silence can reveal the stories we tell ourselves, expose hidden biases, and create space between impulse and action. And we'll ask a question that might just change how you relate to your own mind. What if the greatest alarm system against mental collapse has always been within us, waiting in the quiet? In Stoicism, noise isn't just sound, it's anything that pulls you away from your inner truth. It's the endless to-do lists, the background hum of worry, the compulsive need to check your phone, and the mental chatter that fills every spare moment. For the ancient Stoics, this kind of noise was more than an annoyance. It was a barrier to wisdom and self-awareness. They observed that constant busyness often serves as a subtle form of avoidance, a way to escape the discomfort of confronting our own minds. When we're always occupied, we never have to face our fears, our doubts, or the parts of ourselves we'd rather ignore. This avoidance creates a fragile mental state because weaknesses left unexamined only grow stronger in the shadows. Seneca wrote extensively about this in his letters, emphasizing the value of withdrawing from the crowds not necessarily physically, but mentally. He noted that even in a busy city, we can cultivate inner stillness by refusing to let external demands dictate our attention. In one letter, he advises his friend Lucilius to regularly step back from public life and social engagements, not as a rejection of responsibility, but as a way to reclaim clarity and purpose. He saw that without intentional withdrawal, we risk becoming echoes of other people's opinions and priorities, losing touch with our own values in the process. Consider the forums of ancient Rome, bustling centers of commerce, politics, and gossip. They were the social media feeds of their time, filled with persuasive voices, conflicting agendas, and endless distractions. Today, we have digital forums that follow us everywhere, demanding our attention and fragmenting our focus. The constant scroll through social media, the barrage of notifications, the 24/7 news cycle, these are modern forms of the same ancient noise. They pull us outward, away from self-reflection, and into a reactive state where we're constantly responding to stimuli rather than acting from intention. This external noise often amplifies internal noise. When we're always connected, our minds become cluttered with unresolved thoughts and unmet expectations. We might feel a vague sense of anxiety without knowing why, or find ourselves irritable and distracted without understanding the cause. The Stoics believed that this mental clutter is where fragility begins, because when we can't hear our own thoughts, we can't correct our misjudgments or strengthen our resolve. Noise, in this sense, isn't just an inconvenience, it's a threat to our equanimity. What's one daily distraction that consistently keeps you from quiet self-reflection? It might be the habit of reaching for your phone during a spare moment, or filling silence with background music or podcasts. It could be the mental loop of rehearsing conversations or worrying about future tasks. Recognizing that distraction is the first step toward reclaiming your attention. By identifying what pulls you away from yourself, you begin to weaken its hold and create space for the clarity that silence offers. What did the Stoics mean when they spoke of embracing silence? For them, it was never about simply avoiding sound. It was an active, disciplined practice of turning inward to cultivate mental clarity and observe the workings of their own minds. This intentional quiet was a training ground for discernment, a space where they could detect unhelpful thoughts and impulsive reactions before they spiraled into full-blown disturbances. Think of it not as emptiness, but as a focused attention on the internal landscape, where every judgment and desire could be seen with stark honesty. Stoics like Epictetus placed immense value on these periods of quiet reflection. He taught that our initial impressions, those automatic thoughts that arise in response to events, are not inherently good or bad. Their power comes from our assent, our agreement to believe them and act upon them. In silence, we create the necessary pause to examine these impressions without immediately reacting. Epictetus captured this perfectly when he advised, "Don't let the force of an impression when it first hits you knock you off your feet. Just say to it, hold on a moment, let me see who you are and what you represent. Let me put you to the test." This is the core of the practice, using silence as a container to hold your thoughts up to the light of reason before you decide which ones are worthy of your energy. We see this embodied in the daily routine of Marcus Aurelius. As the most powerful man in the Roman world, his days were filled with the noise of court politics, military strategy, and public demands. Yet, he consistently began his mornings not with frantic activity, but with quiet contemplation. He would retreat into his own mind to prepare for the day ahead, reminding himself of his principles and mentally rehearsing how he would meet challenges with virtue and calm. His personal writings, now known as Meditations, were born from this very practice. They are the profound result of a man using silence to converse with himself, to reinforce his values, and to guard against the mental weaknesses of pride, anger, and fear. Imagine what might surface if you gifted yourself just 5 minutes of true silence today. No background music, no podcasts, no screen to look at. In that space, what thoughts immediately rush to fill the void? You might notice a low hum of anxiety about an upcoming deadline, or a replay of a slightly awkward conversation from yesterday, or perhaps a restless desire to check your phone. These are the hidden anxieties and mental patterns that noise usually helps us suppress. By allowing them to arise in a controlled environment of silence, you aren't feeding them, you are simply acknowledging their presence. This act of non-judgmental observation is the first step in stripping them of their power over you, revealing that many of our deepest worries are nothing more than unexamined impressions waiting for our ascent. Think of silence as a tripwire for the mind. In the quiet, the slightest tremor of a disordered emotion or a runaway thought is instantly detectable, giving you the earliest possible warning that something is amiss internally. The Stoics mastered this practice of attentive stillness not to achieve a blank state of mind, but to become exquisite listeners to their own psychological undercurrents. They understood that mental weaknesses like irrational fear, unchecked desire, or simmering anger don't appear out of nowhere at full strength. They begin as faint whispers, a quickened pulse at the thought of a future challenge, a fleeting pang of envy when hearing of a colleague's success, a slight tightening in the chest during a disagreement. In a noisy environment, these subtle signals are drowned out. We scroll past them, talk over them, or bury them under more activity. But in silence, they become unmistakably clear, allowing for early intervention before a whisper becomes a scream. Seneca profoundly captured this dynamic when he observed that our passions are loudest when they are ignored. He likened unexamined emotions to neglected wounds that only fester and grow more painful. A small, quiet jealousy, if never acknowledged, can mutate into full-blown resentment that poisons relationships. A minor anxiety about finances, left to swirl in the background of a distracted mind, can escalate into a paralyzing fear that hinders decision-making. Silence is the practice of shining a light on these mental processes the moment they appear, however small they seem. It is the difference between noticing a single smoke alarm chirping and ignoring it until the entire house is filled with smoke. A powerful way to visualize this is to consider the integrity of a building's foundation. A tiny hairline crack might seem insignificant at first glance. It causes no immediate instability and is easy to overlook amidst the daily comings and goings within the structure. But to a skilled inspector, that small crack is a critical alarm. It is a sign of shifting pressures beneath the surface that, left unaddressed, will inevitably widen. What begins as a minor flaw can eventually threaten the entire edifice. Our minds operate on a similar principle. That initial quiet impulse to snap at a loved one after a long day is the psychological equivalent of that hairline crack. It's a small signal of accumulated stress and impatience. If we're too busy or too noisy to hear it, we ignore the alarm. Then, the next minor irritation might cause us to actually lash out, creating a larger crack in our relationships and our own character. The Stoic practice of silence is what allows us to be that skilled inspector of our own foundation, noticing the first signs of weakness so we can reinforce them immediately. This raises a vital question for our own lives. What mental alarms have you been ignoring because of the constant noise? Is there a low-grade anxiety you keep pushing down by turning on the television? A lingering resentment you avoid by filling every moment with social plans? A quiet dissatisfaction you numb with online shopping or endless scrolling? These aren't just background feelings, they are your internal tripwires being triggered. The first and most gentle alerts that something within your value system or your perspective is out of alignment. The noise doesn't solve them, it just temporarily muffles the alarm, allowing the underlying issue to grow in strength until it one day demands your attention with far greater force and consequence. Silence exposes the stories we tell ourselves. In the absence of external noise, the internal narratives we've constructed, often without our conscious consent, finally have the space to be heard. And what we frequently discover is that these stories are not factual reports of reality, but rather distorted interpretations filled with cognitive biases that systematically weaken our mental resilience. The ancient Stoics didn't have our modern psychological terminology, but they possessed a deep, practical understanding of how these irrational thought patterns operate. They recognized that human suffering is rarely caused by events themselves, but by our judgments about those events, judgments that are frequently clouded by distortions like catastrophizing, where we imagine the worst-case scenario, or overgeneralization, where we take one negative incident and apply it to our entire lives. Marcus Aurelius offered a powerful antidote to this in his Meditations, writing, "The things you think about determine the quality of your mind. Your soul takes on the color of your thoughts." He constantly practiced questioning his initial impressions, peeling back the layers of his automatic reactions to see the unvarnished truth beneath. He understood that a quiet mind is a clear mind, one capable of discerning the difference between a rational concern and a cognitive distortion running wild. This practice of silent examination is like turning on a light in a dusty attic. You suddenly see all the mental clutter you've been storing, and you can begin to decide what to keep and what to let go. Consider a common modern scenario. You send a carefully crafted email to a colleague and receive no immediate reply. In the noise of a busy day, this minor event might trigger a cascade of unexamined thoughts. The mind, left unchecked, might jump to conclusions. They're ignoring me because they didn't like my idea, which then generalizes to, no one ever values my contributions, and finally catastrophizes into, I'm going to be overlooked for that promotion. This entire stressful narrative can unfold in seconds, fueled entirely by cognitive bias and not by fact. Now, imagine that same scenario, but you have a practice of silence. Instead of immediately getting swept away by the mental noise, you create a pause. In that quiet moment, you observe the initial worry without reacting to it. You question the impression, you bring reason to bear. They are likely just busy. This is a single data point, not a pattern. My worth is not determined by one delayed email. In the silence, the distorted story loses its power because you are no longer simply believing it, you are examining it. The setback is revealed for what it truly is, a neutral event, not a disaster. This is the profound clarity that silence provides. It creates the necessary distance between you and your thoughts, allowing you to see them as mental events rather than absolute truths. It's in this space that we can catch ourselves in the act of overgeneralizing, personalizing, or fortune-telling. We can notice the familiar feeling of a story starting to spin itself out of control, and we can gently, firmly choose not to follow it down that well-worn path. This isn't about suppressing thoughts, it's about relating to them differently with a calm curiosity that defangs their emotional charge. Can you recall a specific time when a period of silence helped you see a situation with greater clarity? Perhaps during a quiet walk or simply sitting alone with your eyes closed, a problem that seemed overwhelming suddenly appeared manageable. A conflict that felt personal was revealed to be a simple misunderstanding. That shift in perspective is the direct result of silence doing its work, quieting the noise of bias so that the signal of reason can come through. It's in these moments that we build genuine mental resilience, not by avoiding difficult thoughts, but by learning to sit with them in the quiet until they reveal their true, and often much less intimidating, nature. Where do you turn when the world falls silent? For many of us, that question can feel unsettling because we're so accustomed to seeking answers, validation, and even our sense of self from the outside, from the opinions of others, the latest trends, or the constant feedback loop of social media. But the Stoics pointed toward a different source of strength, one that doesn't fluctuate with external circumstances. They called it the inner citadel, a fortress of the mind built not on the shifting sands of praise and criticism, but on the unshakable ground of personal virtue and reason. Silence is the primary tool for constructing and reinforcing this inner stronghold. It's in the quiet that we slowly untangle our self-worth from what others think and begin to find a deep, lasting assurance that comes solely from within. Epictetus, who began his life as a slave and understood powerlessness better than most, framed this entire conversation around a simple but profound dichotomy. He said, "Some things are within our power while others are not. Within our power are our own judgments, our impulses, our desires and aversions. In short, everything that is truly our own doing. Not within our power are our body, our property, our reputation, and our status, everything that is ultimately subject to the whims of fate and other people." His entire philosophy was built on training oneself to care only about what is within that inner realm of control. And how do we learn to distinguish between the two? We need silence. In the noisy marketplace of life, the lines blur constantly. The applause of a crowd can feel like genuine worth. A critical comment can feel like a personal wound. It's only when we step back into a quiet space that we can slowly, carefully sort through these impressions and ask ourselves the essential question: is this within my control? Consider the modern habit of seeking constant feedback. We post a photo and wait for likes to tell us it was a good one. We share an idea in a meeting and look to our boss's expression for validation that it was smart. There's nothing inherently wrong with feedback, but when we become dependent on it for our emotional equilibrium, we hand over the keys to our inner citadel. We make our peace of mind contingent on external factors we cannot control. Now, contrast that with the assurance found in solitude. Imagine making a difficult decision based on your principles, and then, instead of immediately calling a friend to seek approval, you sit with it in silence. You examine your own motives. You confirm for yourself that the action was aligned with your values. The approval that comes from that internal confirmation is far more stable and empowering than any external praise could ever be. It doesn't evaporate if someone else disagrees. This is the core of inner sovereignty, the ability to be the final judge of your own character and actions. It's not about arrogance or ignoring wise counsel. It's about developing an internal compass so reliable that you can listen to the opinions of the world without being swayed by them off your chosen path. Silence is the workshop where that compass is calibrated. In the absence of other voices, you learn to hear your own. You become less reactive to the latest comment or the changing mood of the crowd because you have a centered, quiet place to return to, a place where your worth is not up for a vote. This brings us to a potentially uncomfortable but vital reflection. Do you ever feel a slight resistance to the idea of silence, a subtle urge to pick up your phone, turn on the television, or find someone to talk to the moment you're alone with your thoughts? That resistance is often a quiet admission of fear. We fear the silence because it means facing ourselves without any filters or distractions. It means confronting the gap between who we aspire to be and who we actually are in our quieter moments. It might mean acknowledging doubts we've been ignoring or admitting that we've been building our self-esteem on a foundation of external achievements that could crumble at any moment. This fear is completely natural, but the Stoic invitation is to lean into it, to understand that the only way to build genuine self-trust is to spend time with the person you're learning to trust yourself. And that requires turning down the volume of the world and turning up the volume of your own inner dialogue, not to criticize but to understand and strengthen. Stoic silence is active attention, not passive absence. It's the deliberate practice of turning your awareness inward to observe the flow of your thoughts and emotions without immediately getting caught in their current. This might sound strikingly familiar because it shares a profound kinship with modern mindfulness. Both traditions, though separated by centuries and cultures, converge on a single essential point: the power of non-judgmental observation. The goal isn't to empty the mind or achieve a state of blank bliss, but to become a calm, detached witness to your own internal world. You learn to watch thoughts arise, a worry about work, a flash of irritation, a longing for something, and instead of instinctively grabbing onto them or trying to push them away, you simply note their presence. You see them as passing mental weather patterns, not as commands you must obey or truths you must believe. This practice of observing without being swept away is the bedrock of emotional resilience. Seneca beautifully captured this vigilant, protective quality of awareness when he wrote about guarding the mind as one would guard a fortress, noting that the mind should be kept carefully within its own power, so that it may be able to sustain the assaults of either hope or fear. He wasn't suggesting we build walls to never feel anything. Rather, he was advising us to be the watchful guardian on the ramparts, seeing the approaching thoughts from a distance and deciding which, if any, should be granted entry. This is the very essence of both Stoicism and mindfulness, maintaining a sovereign command over your own inner gates. Consider a simple, practical example that bridges these two worlds, the mindful breath. When you feel a wave of overwhelm beginning to build, perhaps your heart starts to race after reading a stressful email. The mindfulness instruction is to gently bring your attention to the physical sensation of your breath. You don't try to force it to be calm, you just feel the air moving in and out. This act of anchoring yourself in a neutral sensation creates a crucial pause. It's the same purposeful gap that a Stoic would create before assenting to an impression. In that pause between the stimulus of the email and your potential reaction, space opens up. In that space, you are no longer on autopilot, you are choosing. You might still need to send a firm reply, but it will be a response crafted from reason, not a reaction fueled by pure emotion. The next time you feel that familiar tug of overwhelm, whether from stress, anger, or anxiety, try this small experiment. Instead of immediately following the impulse to act out or suppress the feeling, bring a moment of stoic silence into the mix. Simply notice your very next breath. Feel the cool air entering your nostrils and the warm air leaving. Do this just once with full attention. In that tiny act, you are practicing the ancient art of guarding your fortress. You are stepping back from the chaos of the mind and into the clarity of the observer, proving to yourself that you are not your thoughts, but the awareness that holds them. In the gap between event and action, silence is your shield. It's that crucial, almost imperceptible moment where everything can change, where a raw, unexamined impulse can either dictate your behavior or be gently disarmed by your reason. The Stoics saw this pause not as a passive void, but as the most active and empowering space we can inhabit. It's the birthplace of choice, the split second where we exercise our most human faculty, the ability to question our initial impressions and decide whether they align with our character before we give them our assent. This is the core of the Stoic concept of hypolepsis, the act of withholding judgment. It's the mental equivalent of catching a ball that's been thrown at you, holding it in your hands for a moment to inspect it, rather than immediately throwing it back or letting it knock you over. Epictetus, who dedicated his life to teaching this very skill, put it with stunning clarity. People are not disturbed by things, but by the views they take of them. An event itself is neutral. It simply is. The disturbance, the anger, the anxiety, the pain, all of that is generated in the split second after the event, when our mind rushes in with a story, an interpretation, a judgment about what that event means. Someone cuts you off in traffic. The event is a car changing lanes abruptly. The automatic impression might be, that person is inconsiderate and dangerous. They disrespected me. That impression, if immediately believed, triggers a flush of anger, a shout, a honk of the horn, a reaction that now puts you in a state of agitation for the next hour. But what if, in that gap, you inserted a moment of deliberate silence? In that quiet space, you could examine the impression. You could question it. Is that driver truly targeting me personally? Could they be rushing to an emergency, or are they simply distracted? This isn't about making excuses for others, it's about protecting your own peace. By withholding immediate assent, you reclaim your power. The event remains the same, but your view of it and your subsequent peace of mind is now yours to choose. We see this principle embodied in the unshakable composure of historical figures like Cato the Younger, a Roman senator famous for his unwavering Stoic integrity. During intense political crises, when provocations were designed to elicit an emotional outburst, Cato was known for his profound pauses. He would often fall into a deep, contemplative silence in the middle of a heated debate, not out of uncertainty, but out of supreme discipline. His opponents would try to goad him to force a reaction, but he would simply stand there, quiet and unmoved, mastering the space between their provocation and his response. That silence was his shield. It allowed him to respond from a place of principle rather than pride, from virtue rather than vengeance. His measured words, when they finally came, carried immense weight precisely because they were not a product of impulsive emotion. Think about your own life for a moment. Can you identify a recent situation where inserting even a few seconds of silence could have completely altered the outcome? Perhaps it was a text message you fired off in anger that damaged a relationship, a sharp word spoken to a child that you immediately regretted, or a hasty decision made under pressure that led to more problems. In each case, the mistake wasn't the initial feeling. The flash of anger or spike of fear is a natural biological signal. The error was in skipping the pause. It was in allowing that initial impression to instantly become an action without the filter of your higher reasoning. The practice of stoic silence is the dedicated training of building that pause into your life until it becomes your default setting. It's the conscious decision to let the first wave of emotion crash against the shore of your awareness without being swept away by its current, so you can then decide how to navigate the waters with wisdom. What do you hear when you stop running from your fears? In the quiet, without the usual distractions to numb or disguise them, our deepest anxieties finally have the space to emerge. They might arrive as a tightness in your chest when you think about your financial future, a knot in your stomach at the possibility of failure, or a quiet whisper of dread about your health. The natural instinct is to treat these feelings like an enemy, to immediately shut them down by turning on music, calling a friend, or diving into work. But the Stoics proposed a radically different approach. They understood that anxiety is not a random affliction. It is a signal, a flashing indicator light on the dashboard of the mind. It points directly toward a value we hold that feels threatened or an aspect of the future we are trying to control but cannot. In the blessed silence, we can finally read that signal clearly, not to be tortured by it, but to understand its source and address it with reason. Seneca, in his profound letters, put his finger on the very heart of this human experience. He wrote, "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality." This single sentence captures the immense power that silence has to disarm our fears. When we avoid quiet, our anxieties live and grow exclusively in the limitless, terrifying theater of our imagination. We spin elaborate stories about everything that could possibly go wrong, rehearsing tragedies that have not happened and may never occur. The noise of daily life doesn't silence this internal cinema. It just turns down the volume slightly, allowing the movie to play on in the background of our minds, draining our energy and clouding our present moment with apprehensions about a future that does not yet exist. Silence is the act of finally turning toward the screen and turning on the lights. It's in that illuminated space that we can see the fear for what it truly is, a series of thoughts, not an impending reality. Consider someone who is deeply afraid of public speaking. In the noise of their daily routine, this fear might manifest as a general sense of avoidance, always declining opportunities to present, feeling a jolt of anxiety when the topic is mentioned, and carrying a low-grade dread about any future situation where they might be forced into the spotlight. The fear remains a vague, powerful monster because it is never directly confronted. Now, imagine that person sits in silence for 10 minutes and intentionally invites the fear in. They don't fight it, they just observe the physical sensations and the catastrophic thoughts. I will forget my words, everyone will laugh, I will be humiliated. In the quiet, something remarkable happens. The monster, when stared at directly, begins to shrink. The person can start to question the thoughts. Have I ever actually forgotten everything? Is laughing likely, or is that my insecurity talking? What is the absolute worst-case scenario, and could I survive it? This process of rational examination, which is only possible in a state of calm attention, transforms the fear from an overwhelming force into a manageable set of concerns. It might not vanish completely, but it loses its power to paralyze. Each subsequent period of silent exposure further weakens its hold, proving to the mind that the anticipation is almost always far worse than the event itself. This practice of turning toward our anxieties in a quiet space is how we reclaim the territory of our own minds. We stop allowing our imagination to be a place of torture and start using it as a tool for preparation and problem solving. The fear of a difficult conversation becomes less daunting when you've sat with it in silence, mentally rehearsed your points calmly, and accepted all possible outcomes beforehand. The anxiety about a health scare diminishes when you quietly differentiate between the known facts and the terrifying stories you've been telling yourself about those facts. So let's bring this home with a simple but powerful exercise. Can you name one specific fear that seems to grow louder and more menacing when it's buried under noise and distraction, but becomes quieter, smaller, and more manageable when you finally give it your quiet, full attention? Perhaps it's the fear of being alone, which feels overwhelming when you frantically fill your calendar, but softens when you consciously choose to spend an evening in your own company. Or maybe it's the fear of not being good enough, which is amplified by constant social comparison, but diminishes when you sit in silence and reconnect with your own inherent values and efforts. Identifying this one fear is the first step in choosing to meet it not with panic, but with peaceful, stoic curiosity. Stoics sought silence not for comfort, but for strength. This might seem like a paradox at first. Why would anyone willingly choose to sit in the quiet, especially when that quiet feels unsettling or even boring? The answer lies in a broader Stoic principle known as voluntary discomfort. The idea was to intentionally practice with minor hardships to inoculate the mind against the major ones that life would inevitably throw their way. By regularly choosing to experience small forms of unease, like the cold or hunger, or in this case, the absence of noise, they were building a kind of psychological muscle memory for resilience. They weren't masochists, they were pragmatists. They understood that a life lived in pursuit of constant comfort and ease was a fragile one, because the world is not a consistently comfortable or easy place. By voluntarily stepping into discomfort, they ensured they would never be blindsided by it. The Roman teacher Musonius Rufus was a powerful advocate for this practice. He argued that comfort and luxury make us soft and anxious, while willingly embracing difficulty makes us robust and confident. He famously said, "How can a person who has never endured hardship be truly strong?" It is impossible. For him, hardship wasn't an enemy to be avoided at all costs. It was a training partner. He encouraged his students to practice with simple acts, wearing plain clothing, eating modest food, and exposing themselves to the elements. Within this framework, choosing silence is a direct application of his teaching. The initial itch to reach for a distraction, the slight anxiety that arises when you're alone with your thoughts, the feeling that you should be doing something, these are all minor hardships. By willingly sitting with them instead of immediately scratching the itch, you are conducting a controlled stress test on your own mind. You are proving to yourself, in a small but significant way, that you can handle unease without crumbling. This repeated practice is what forges mental toughness and dramatically reduces your overall vulnerability to life's larger disturbances. A perfect modern parallel to this ancient practice is the concept of a digital detox. Think about it, voluntarily deciding to spend a day or even a few hours without the constant stream of notifications, emails, and social media feeds is a form of voluntary discomfort in the 21st century. For many, the initial feeling is one of anxiety, a sense of being disconnected or missing out. There's a palpable unease that comes from not being able to instantly check what's happening elsewhere. But those who stick with it almost universally report a shift. After the initial withdrawal fades, they often discover a newfound sense of calm, clarity, and presence. The mental space that was previously occupied by reacting to external stimuli suddenly becomes available for deeper, more focused thought. This modern challenge is a direct echo of the Stoic practice of embracing silence. It's not about rejecting technology. It's about choosing for a period to strengthen your ability to be content without it, thereby ensuring that you use it as a tool rather than being used by it as a master. Why not conduct a small experiment of your own? Try designating a single day, or even just a half day, where you consciously eliminate all non-essential background noise. This means no music or podcasts while you commute or do chores, no television on in the background while you cook, no scrolling through your phone during any moment of downtime. It doesn't have to be a day of complete monastic silence. You can still talk to people and engage in necessary tasks. The goal is simply to remove the filler noise and observe what happens. Pay close attention to the mental shifts that occur. You'll likely notice the initial urge to fill the void, a restlessness that feels almost physical. But if you stay with it, you might also notice subtler things, a greater awareness of your surroundings, a clearer train of thought, or the emergence of an idea or solution that had been buried under the usual mental static. This small act of voluntary discomfort isn't a punishment. It's a powerful workout for your attention and your peace of mind, teaching you that you are far more resilient than your distractions have led you to believe. The best decisions are often made in silence. This isn't just a comforting platitude. It's a practical truth born from the Stoic understanding of how our judgment gets clouded. When we're surrounded by noise, the clamor of other people's opinions, the internal pressure of our own rushing thoughts, the emotional turbulence of fear or excitement, we're not seeing the situation clearly. We're reacting to the most immediate stimuli rather than responding from a place of deep alignment with our core values. The Stoics advised a deliberate retreat inward before any significant action, a quiet consultation with one's own reason to ensure that the impending choice was guided by virtue and not by fleeting passion or external influence. Marcus Aurelius, who faced countless weighty decisions as the Emperor of Rome, constantly reminded himself of this need for quiet examination. In his meditations, he wrote, "Look within. Within is the fountain of good, and it will ever bubble up if you will ever dig." He was pointing toward that inner source of wisdom, the logos or divine reason that the Stoics believed was present within every rational being. But to hear that inner fountain, one must first quiet the noise. For Marcus, this meant pausing to examine the true nature of the action he was about to take. Was it for the common good? Was it just? Was it courageous and temperate? These questions couldn't be answered honestly in the heat of a moment. They required the sober, clear-headed space that only silence could provide. Consider the stark contrast between two ways of making a choice. The first is rushed and reactive. Imagine a leader in a high-pressure meeting, faced with a sudden, unexpected problem. The room is tense, eyes are upon them, and there's a palpable expectation for an immediate solution. Feeling the pressure, they quickly choose a course of action, perhaps the first one that comes to mind, or the one that seems most likely to please the anxious people in the room. The decision is made, but it's born from the noise of the circumstance. Now picture a different approach. That same leader, sensing the weight of the moment, does something counterintuitive. They don't immediately speak. They take a slow breath, creating a small island of silence amidst the chaos. In that brief pause, they disengage from the external pressure and turn inward. They quickly consult their principles. Is this path true? Is it necessary? Is it kind? The answer that arises from that quiet place may be the same as the first impulsive one, or it may be entirely different. The crucial distinction is that it is now a response rather than a reaction. It is a decision infused with intention and character, not one dictated by circumstance. This practice transforms decision-making from a stressful event into a deliberate practice of integrity. It's the difference between being a leaf blown about by the wind and being the tree that, while feeling the wind, remains rooted and chooses how to bend. The silence doesn't guarantee a perfect outcome. The future is always uncertain, but it does guarantee that your choice was yours. It was an expression of your best judgment at the time, untainted by the frenzy of the crowd or the turbulence of unchecked emotion. This is how we build a life of which we can be proud, one conscious decision at a time. Can you recall a significant decision in your own life that was markedly improved because you took the time to step away and be alone with your thoughts? Perhaps it was a career change where quiet reflection helped you distinguish between a genuine calling and a mere desire for more status or money. Maybe it was a personal relationship crossroads where silence allowed you to hear your own heart's truth over the well-meaning but conflicting advice of friends and family. That clarity you found in the quiet wasn't an accident. It was your innate wisdom finally given the space to speak. It's a resource that remains available to you, a silent counsel always in session, waiting for you to take your seat. What can you actually change when everything else is noise? This question lies at the very heart of Stoic philosophy, and it's in the profound quiet of intentional silence that its answer becomes unmistakably clear. The world around us is filled with a constant stream of events, opinions, and circumstances that we often mistakenly believe we can command. We worry about the weather ruining our plans, we stress over a colleague's mood, we agonize about the state of the global economy. This frantic attempt to manage the unmanageable generates immense internal noise, a churning anxiety that we are somehow failing because the world refuses to bend to our will. Silence acts as the great clarifier. When you strip away all the external static and sit in a state of quiet attention, the boundary between what is truly yours to command and what is not becomes starkly evident. The only things that belong to you, that you can genuinely control, are your own judgments, your choices, your values, and your actions. Everything else, the past, the actions of others, the outcomes of your efforts, even your own body and reputation resides in the realm of externals, ultimately subject to forces beyond your command. Epictetus opens his manual for life, the Enchiridion, with this foundational principle, stating, "Some things are within our power while others are not." Within our power are our faculty of choice, our opinions, our impulses, our desires, and our aversions. Not within our power are our body, our property, our reputation, and our public office. He concludes that if you mistake what is not your own for being your own, you will be met with frustration, failure, and sorrow. This is the Stoic dichotomy of control, and it is not a philosophy of passive resignation. It is a strategy for immense personal power. By focusing all your energy exclusively on what is within your sphere, your own character and responses, you cease wasting precious effort on battles you cannot win. You become like a skilled sailor who cannot control the wind, but who can absolutely control the set of the sails. The silence is where you learn to feel the difference between the wind and the sails, between the external event and your internal reaction to it. Imagine a common morning scenario. You're driving to an important meeting and you hit unexpected gridlock traffic. The initial automatic reaction is one of frustration and anxiety. Your mind starts racing with noisy thoughts. This is a disaster. They'll think I'm unreliable. Why do these things always happen to me? If only I'd left earlier. This internal storm is a direct result of trying to control something you simply cannot, the flow of traffic. Now, imagine applying a moment of stoic silence to the same situation. Instead of fueling the frustration, you take a quiet breath and turn your attention inward. You acknowledge the reality. The traffic is stopped. This is an external fact. It is not within your power. Then you turn your focus to what is within your power. You can choose to use this time productively, perhaps by listening to an audiobook or organizing your thoughts for the meeting. You can choose to call ahead to notify them you'll be delayed, an action that is responsible and courteous. Most importantly, you can choose your judgment about the event. You can decide that this is not a personal catastrophe, but merely a minor inconvenience that does not define your worth or your day. The situation hasn't changed, but your entire experience of it has been transformed by shifting your focus from the uncontrollable to the controllable. This practice of quiet discernment is how we dismantle the illusion of control, an illusion that is the primary source of most of our daily stress and unhappiness. We exhaust ourselves trying to manage outcomes, people's perceptions, and unpredictable events, all the while neglecting the one thing we can truly master, ourselves. The quiet space allows you to conduct a simple but powerful audit of your worries. Take a moment to mentally list the things that cause you anxiety. Now, in the clarity of that silence, hold each one up to the simple question, is this within my control? The answer will immediately tell you where to direct your energy. Worrying about a loved one's health, you cannot control their biology, but you can control your support, your compassion, and your assistance in finding good care. Anxious about an upcoming job interview, you cannot control the hiring manager's decision or the strength of the other candidates, but you can control your preparation, your professionalism, and your attitude. This isn't about giving up. It's about focusing your efforts with laser precision on the arena where you can actually make a difference and releasing the draining, futile struggle against everything else. Silence is the gym for your emotional muscles. Just as an athlete builds physical strength through consistent, deliberate training, we can build our capacity to handle life's inevitable setbacks by regularly engaging in the purposeful practice of quiet. The Stoics understood this form of mental conditioning intimately. They didn't view serenity as a lucky state of being that some people are born with and others are not. They saw it as a skill, a resilient inner fortitude that could be developed through disciplined exercise. And their primary training ground for this was silence. In the undisturbed quiet, they would intentionally practice enduring mental and emotional disturbances without allowing them to cause internal collapse. They would mentally rehearse potential hardships, sit with discomfort, and observe their own reactions, all within the safe container of their own minds. This wasn't about avoiding feeling anything. It was about strengthening their ability to feel without being shattered. to experience difficulty without being defined by it. Seneca, who faced exile, chronic illness, and the political turmoil of Nero's court, wrote extensively about this cultivated calm. He offered a powerful image for this mental state, advising us to cultivate a mind that can weather the storm while remaining undisturbed, like the deep waters of the ocean that remain calm beneath a turbulent surface. The storms of life, the criticisms, the failures, the unexpected losses will inevitably come. We cannot control their arrival, but through silent practice, we can control the depth of our own waters. We can build an inner equilibrium so stable that the surface chaos, while real and felt, does not dictate our entire experience. This equanimity is the very essence of emotional resilience. It's not the absence of feeling, but the presence of a steady core that holds you firm no matter how strong the winds blow. We can see a modern parallel to this ancient practice in the world of high-performance athletics. Before a major competition, many elite athletes engage in a ritual of quiet visualization. In the silence of a locker room or a quiet corner of the field, they close their eyes and mentally rehearse their performance. They don't just visualize success, they vividly imagine the pressure, the roar of the crowd, the potential for mistakes, and their own ideal response to those challenges. They feel the surge of adrenaline and practice calming it. They see themselves missing a shot and then immediately resetting with focus. This silent mental rehearsal is a form of emotional weightlifting. It's strengthening their capacity to stay poised and execute under immense pressure, ensuring that when the real moment arrives, their mind and body are prepared because they have already endured the disturbance in the safe space of their imagination. They have, in a very stoic way, practiced the art of weathering the storm. This practice is available to everyone, not just philosophers or athletes. Think about your own upcoming day. Is there a challenging meeting, a difficult conversation, or a demanding task on your horizon? How might you use just a few minutes of intentional silence this morning to fortify yourself for it? You could sit quietly and simply envision the event unfolding. Notice the details, the room, the people, the potential points of friction. Then, rather than getting swept into anxiety about it, practice observing those feelings from a place of calm detachment. Mentally rehearse staying anchored in your values, listening deeply and responding rather than reacting. This isn't magical thinking, it's neural training. You are building the pathways in your brain that associate that challenging situation with a state of calm competence instead of frantic reactivity. You are quite literally building your emotional resilience rep by rep in the gym of silence, so you can carry that strength out into the noise of the world. A noisy mind is a vulnerable mind. It's a space so filled with the debris of past regrets, future anxieties, and endless to-do lists that there's no room for clear, rational thought to take root and flourish. The ancient Stoics saw this internal cacophony not just as a personal annoyance, but as a fundamental obstacle to living a virtuous and meaningful life. They believed that a cluttered psyche, much like a cluttered room, obscures our access to reason, the very faculty that allows us to distinguish right from wrong, what is within our control from what is not. When our mental space is overcrowded with trivial worries, unresolved emotions, and fragmented thoughts, our judgment becomes clouded. We react impulsively instead of responding wisely. We make decisions based on fleeting emotions rather than enduring principles, and we find ourselves constantly swayed by external events because we lack the inner clarity to anchor ourselves. Marcus Aurelius, in his private meditations, constantly returned to this theme of mental tidying. He wrote, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts," and elsewhere urged himself to annihilate distracting thoughts, to discard your perceptions of it, and then the affliction itself is annihilated. He wasn't advocating for the suppression of all thought, but for a rigorous process of discernment. He practiced examining each thought that entered his mind and asking a simple but profound question: is this necessary? Is this thought serving my virtue and my peace, or is it merely mental clutter that is draining my focus and weakening my resolve? This daily practice was his way of sweeping the inner chambers of his mind, ensuring that only what was true, useful, and aligned with his core values was allowed to reside there. The comparison to a cluttered physical space is incredibly apt. Imagine walking into a room that is overflowing with unsorted mail, clothes piled on chairs, and miscellaneous items covering every surface. The sheer visual noise is overwhelming. You can't find the important document you need. You feel agitated and paralyzed, and the task of cleaning it feels so monumental that you might just avoid the room altogether. This is precisely what happens inside a cluttered mind. Important insights and creative ideas get buried under piles of mental junk. The mental energy that could be directed towards solving problems or connecting with loved ones is instead wasted on ruminating over a minor slight from yesterday or worrying about a hypothetical problem next week. The clutter creates a sense of being perpetually busy yet profoundly ineffective, constantly in motion but never truly progressing toward what matters. This mental disarray directly leads to poor judgments. A clear mind can see a situation from multiple angles, weigh options calmly, and choose a path aligned with long-term goals. A cluttered mind, however, is like a committee where everyone is shouting at once. Under stress, it will latch onto the loudest, most immediate thought, often a fear-based or desire-driven impulse, and act on that, leading to choices that are short-sighted, emotionally charged, and frequently regrettable. The noise inside our heads becomes the only voice we can hear, drowning out the quieter, wiser counsel of our own reason. What is one persistent piece of mental clutter that you could identify for clearing through a few moments of intentional silence? It might be the recurring worry about a project at work that has grown larger than life in your imagination, or the lingering resentment from an old argument that you mentally replay without ever resolving. It could be the constant comparison of your own life to the curated highlight reels you see online. By simply naming it, you bring it out of the shadowy background and into the light of your awareness. You take the first step in decluttering, creating a small pocket of space where a calmer, more reasoned perspective can begin to emerge. How much of your speech is noise and how much is meaning? This is a question the Stoics would have us ask ourselves daily, for they saw idle talk, particularly gossip, as one of the most insidious and draining forms of mental noise. It's not just a casual social exchange, it's a significant leak of your vital energy and a direct assault on your inner integrity. When you engage in gossip, you are not merely sharing information about another person. You are actively training your mind to focus on the external, on the flaws and affairs of others, which are entirely outside your control. This outward focus pulls you away from the one thing you can truly command, your own character and judgments. It creates a dependency on the drama and missteps of others to feel engaged or entertained, weakening your ability to generate your own sense of purpose and peace from within. Epictetus, with his characteristically blunt wisdom, laid down a simple but profound rule for speech in his Enchiridion. He advised, "Be for the most part silent, or speak merely what is necessary and in few words." This wasn't a call for total muteness, but for supreme discernment. He urged his students to question the necessity and virtue of every word before it left their lips. Was what they were about to say true? Was it kind? Was it useful? If it failed any of these tests, especially the test of usefulness, then it was mere noise, a squandering of attention that could have been directed toward self-improvement or meaningful action. Gossip, by its very nature, almost always fails this Stoic test. It is rarely entirely true, almost never kind, and almost never useful for any purpose other than temporary social bonding at someone else's expense. Consider the tangible difference between two choices in a common scenario. You're at work, and a colleague pulls you aside to share a juicy piece of rumor about another coworker's personal life. The path of least resistance is to indulge, to lean in, listen, and perhaps even add your own speculation. In the moment, it might feel like a harmless connection, a bit of social glue. But pay attention to the aftermath. Notice the subtle shift in your mental state. You might feel a slight buzz of excitement, but underneath it, there's often a lingering residue of guilt, pettiness, or anxiety. You've just cluttered your mind with information that is not yours to hold, that you cannot act upon, and that ultimately distracts you from your own work and purpose. You've also subtly trained your brain to seek drama. Now contrast that with the choice of mindful silence. In that same scenario, you have the option to politely disengage. You can offer a neutral response or simply choose not to participate. This isn't about being self-righteous or cold. It's about consciously guarding your mental space. The immediate result might feel awkward, but the long-term preservation of your focus and integrity is immense. By not taking in that information, you prevent your mind from having to process it, judge it, or carry it around. You conserve your mental energy for your own tasks and your own moral development. You choose to keep your own inner citadel clean and uncluttered by the external affairs of others, which is a fundamental Stoic aim. This week, make it a personal challenge to become a quiet observer of gossip's true cost. The next time you find yourself either speaking about or listening to the personal details of someone who isn't present, pause for just a second and turn your awareness inward. Observe the actual effect it has on your sense of peace. Does it make you feel more connected and grounded, or does it leave you feeling slightly agitated and distracted? Does it align with the person you aspire to be, someone of character and focus, or does it pull you toward pettiness? This simple act of observation isn't about judgment. It's about gathering data on how different forms of communication truly impact your mental environment, empowering you to choose more intentionally what you allow into the sacred space of your own mind. In solitude, we meet our truest selves. This statement might sound intimidating in a world that often equates being alone with loneliness, but the Stoics drew a vital distinction between these two states. Loneliness is a sense of lack, a feeling of isolation that stems from a perceived absence of connection. Solitude, in contrast, is a chosen state of purposeful withdrawal, an intentional clearing of the external to make space for an encounter with the internal. The Stoics didn't see this alone time as a punishment or a retreat from life. They saw it as the most fertile ground for cultivating self-knowledge, clarity, and an unshakable strength that cannot be found in the crowd. It is in the quiet company of our own thoughts that we are able to strip away the roles we play for others and confront the raw material of our own character, for better or worse. Seneca, in his moral letters to Lucilius, championed this practice of strategic withdrawal. He wrote, "You must withdraw into yourself as much as you can. Associate with people who are likely to improve you. Welcome those whom you are capable of improving. The process is mutual, for people learn while they teach." His advice is beautifully layered. He isn't advocating for becoming a hermit. He is prescribing a rhythmic dance between social engagement and solitary reflection. We go out into the world to learn from others and to contribute, but we must then retreat into solitude to digest those experiences, to sort through the impressions they left, and to integrate the lessons into our own being. Without this crucial second step, we risk becoming mere reflectors of the people we spend time with. Our opinions a patchwork of others' ideas rather than a coherent philosophy we have tested and claimed for ourselves. This transformative power of solitude echoes far beyond ancient Rome, resonating through the lives of history's most prolific thinkers and creators. The physicist Isaac Newton developed his theories on calculus and gravity during a year of isolation at his family estate, forced away from Cambridge by the Great Plague. The author Maya Angelou famously rented a sparse hotel room, devoid of decorations and distractions, where she would go each morning to write in pure, uninterrupted silence. The visionary inventor Nikola Tesla conducted much of his most brilliant theoretical work in intense solitude, visualizing complex machines in his mind before ever committing them to paper. These individuals weren't merely hiding from the world, they were leveraging the creative and clarifying potential of aloneness. They understood that the constant noise of society can drown out the subtle, original voice of one's own genius. In the silence of their own company, they found not emptiness, but a vast inner universe ripe for exploration. This invites a deeply personal and perhaps uncomfortable question. How comfortable are you truly being alone with your own thoughts? For many, the immediate impulse is to reach for a device, to turn on a podcast, or to find some other form of external input the moment solitude presents itself. This itch to distract ourselves is a telling signal. It often points to a gentle fear of what we might discover in the quiet boredom, unresolved pain, or perhaps a sense that we don't really know the person we are when no one is watching. Yet, it is precisely by sitting with that discomfort that we begin to build an authentic relationship with ourselves. It's how we learn our own rhythms, our true values separate from the tribe, and the unique contours of our own mind. The ability to be peacefully, productively alone is not a symptom of isolation. It is the ultimate hallmark of a secure and well-fortified self, capable of standing firm even when all other voices fall away. While many seek to be heard, Stoics sought to understand. This subtle but profound shift in intention lies at the heart of their approach to communication and conflict. In a world that often rewards the loudest voice and the quickest retort, the Stoics championed a different kind of power, the power that comes from truly listening, not just to the words of others, but to the deeper meanings and motivations behind them. This practice of attentive silence is far from passive. It is an active discipline of empathy and discernment that allows for wiser judgments, fewer misunderstandings, and a more profound connection to the shared humanity in every interaction. It aligns perfectly with the Stoic virtue of justice, which involves giving each person and situation the thoughtful consideration they are due. The founder of Stoicism, Zeno of Citium, offered a wonderfully simple and practical piece of anatomical wisdom to illustrate this principle. He is famously quoted as saying, "We have 2 ears and 1 mouth so that we can listen twice as much as we speak." This wasn't just a clever turn of phrase, it was a guiding rule for a virtuous life. The ratio implies a natural balance, a design for how we ought to engage with the world. The mouth, which represents our own opinions, judgments, and reactions, should be used sparingly and with great care. The ears, which represent our capacity to receive information and understand others, should be our primary tools for navigating social life. By inverting the common impulse to lead with our own voice, we open ourselves up to learning, to perceiving reality more accurately, and to responding from a place of comprehensive understanding rather than fragmented assumption. Consider the impact of a leader who embodies this Stoic principle. Imagine a CEO facing a tense boardroom discussion about a failing project. The easy, reactive path would be to dominate the conversation, to defend previous decisions, to explain away the problems, and to assert a new direction with forceful authority. This might create the illusion of control, but it often sows resentment, misses crucial feedback, and leads to further missteps. Now, envision a leader who chooses the path of attentive silence first. They enter the meeting, and instead of presenting their own solution, they pose a single question. Help me understand what you each see as the core issue. Then they truly listen. They don't interrupt to correct or formulate a response while others are talking. They absorb the perspectives from the marketing head, the financial officer, the lead engineer. Their silence creates a container for collective wisdom to emerge. The solution that eventually forms from this place of deep listening will be infinitely more robust, more widely supported, and more likely to succeed because it is built on a foundation of understood reality, not a single person's limited viewpoint. This practice transforms conversations from battles to be won into opportunities for mutual discovery. When we listen with the intent to understand, rather than with the intent to reply, we disarm the defensive parts of our own ego and the ego of the person speaking. We signal that their perspective has value, which in itself reduces conflict. We often discover that what we perceived as a personal attack was merely a poorly expressed concern, or that a seemingly irrational demand makes perfect sense when viewed from the other person's context and constraints. This doesn't mean we must agree with everything we hear, but we cannot possibly respond with virtue and justice until we have first fully comprehended the situation. The Stoic pause, applied externally, creates the space for this comprehension to occur. Your next conversation, whether with a partner, a colleague, or a friend, presents a perfect opportunity to put this ancient wisdom into modern practice. Make a conscious decision to shift your goal from being interesting to being interested. When the other person is speaking, notice the impulse to jump in with your own story or advice and gently set it aside. Focus entirely on what they are saying, and even on what they are not saying: their tone, their body language, the emotion behind the words. You may be surprised at how the dynamic of the interaction changes, how much more you learn, and how much more effectively you are able to connect once you have truly heard them. This is the quiet power of Stoic listening, a practice that turns everyday exchanges into exercises in wisdom and compassion. When insulted, what does your silence say? In that charged moment, the choice to withhold an immediate retort speaks volumes, not about weakness, but about a profound inner strength. It declares that your peace of mind is not for sale, that it cannot be so easily snatched away by another person's careless words or intended provocation. The ancient Stoics viewed this disciplined non-reaction not as suppression, but as a decisive victory, a triumph over the base impulses of anger, pride, and pettiness that so often escalate conflict and shatter our equanimity. They understood that retaliation, however satisfying it might feel in the instant, is almost always a net loss. It hands control of your emotional state over to someone else, allowing their behavior to dictate your own, and it inevitably pulls you down into the very mud you claim to want to avoid. Marcus Aurelius, who faced endless political intrigue and personal slander as emperor, offered timeless guidance on this very point. In his meditations, he reminds himself, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength." And elsewhere he writes, "The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury." His insight cuts to the core of the Stoic position. The words themselves cannot harm you unless you grant them the power to do so by your assent, by your belief that they define you or diminish you. The actual harm comes from our internal reaction, the anger that heats our blood, the resentment that clouds our judgment, the desire to strike back that compromises our character. By choosing silence, you are not ignoring the insult. You are actively choosing to reject its power to corrupt your inner state. You are protecting your own virtue from the pollution of a petty exchange. We find a masterclass in this practice in the serene composure of Socrates, as documented by his student Plato. Throughout his trial and eventual condemnation to death, Socrates was subjected to vicious personal attacks and false accusations. His critics hurled insults, questioned his character, and mocked his philosophy. Yet his response was never one of matching fury or wounded defense. Instead, he met their provocations with a calm, questioning silence, or with gentle, reasoned questions that exposed the emptiness of their claims. He famously stated that an unexamined life is not worth living, and his silence in the face of provocation was the ultimate examination, a refusal to let others define the terms of his existence or the state of his soul. His peace was not dependent on their approval, and his dignity was not shattered by their scorn. His calm was his ultimate rebuttal, a demonstration that his philosophy was not just a set of ideas to be debated, but a lived reality that could withstand the most extreme pressure. This stoic silence is not a cold, indifferent withdrawal. It is a space of immense power and clarity. In the gap between the provocation and your potential response, silence creates a container for choice. It allows you to ask the essential Stoic questions. Is this within my control? Does a response serve any purpose beyond feeding my own ego? Will this action align with my highest values? Often, the answers lead you to conserve your energy for battles that truly matter, rather than squandering it on every minor skirmish. Silence can de-escalate a situation that words would only inflame, leaving the provocateur with nothing to push against, their intended impact dissolving in the face of your unshakable calm. Can you recall a specific time in your own life when choosing silence over a sharp reply successfully diffused a potentially explosive moment? Perhaps during a tense family disagreement, when biting back a clever retort would have only deepened the rift, and your quiet restraint allowed the emotional temperature to drop. Or in a stressful work meeting where a colleague's criticism was designed to provoke you, and your refusal to engage on their terms denied them the reaction they sought, leaving them looking foolish while you maintained your professional composure. In that moment, your silence was not a void. It was an active, powerful force for peace, proving that true strength often resides not in the loudest voice, but in the most disciplined mind. The Stoic morning began not with noise, but with purpose. Before the demands of the world could lay claim to their attention, they dedicated the first moments of their day to a sacred practice of silent reflection. This wasn't a sleepy, passive awakening. It was an active and deliberate preparation of the mind, a mental tuning of the instrument before it was called upon to play the symphony of the day. They understood that the initial hours set the tone for everything that follows, and by filling that space with intention rather than reaction, they built a foundation of resilience that could withstand any turbulence ahead. This quiet ritual was their strategic advantage, a private council where they aligned their actions with their virtues before external pressures could pull them off course. Marcus Aurelius left us the most intimate glimpse into this practice through his personal writings, now known as Meditations. It is widely believed that much of this profound work was composed in the early morning hours. One passage, likely written at dawn, perfectly captures the spirit of this preparatory exercise. When you arise in the morning, think of what a precious privilege it is to be alive, to breathe, to think, to enjoy, to love. He then immediately pivots to a sterner, more practical preparation. Begin each day by telling yourself, "Today I shall be meeting with interference, ingratitude, insolence, disloyalty, ill will, and selfishness." This is the beautiful, balanced heart of the Stoic morning meditation. It starts with profound gratitude for the basic miracle of existence, which grounds you in contentment and perspective. Then, it realistically anticipates the challenges and frustrations inherent in human interaction. This dual practice doesn't breed pessimism, it inoculates against surprise and irritation. By mentally rehearsing potential obstacles, you preemptively disarm them of their emotional impact. When you then encounter that difficult person or frustrating delay, it feels less like a personal affront and more like a predicted event that you are already equipped to handle with grace. The parallels to modern morning routines are striking and demonstrate the timelessness of this need for a purposeful start. Today, many people have embraced the practice of morning journaling, particularly methods like the morning pages from Julia Cameron's The Artist's Way or the structured prompts of productivity journals. The core intention is the same as the Stoic practice, to clear the mental clutter and set a conscious direction for the day. The ancient Stoic might have quietly reviewed their principles: what is within my control? What would virtue look like in today's tasks? While the modern practitioner might write down their top 3 priorities or affirmations, both are acts of deliberate creation, using the quiet morning space to define the day on their own terms rather than ceding that power to the first email or notification that buzzes on their phone. The medium may differ, internal reflection versus putting pen to paper, but the psychological effect is remarkably similar. It creates a buffer between the raw, reactive self that just woke up and the intentional, purposeful self who is ready to engage with the world. This practice is far more than positive thinking. It is cognitive fortification. By sitting in silence and visualizing the day's potential challenges, you are essentially running mental software updates and installing patches for your predictable bugs. You know you have a tendency to become impatient in long meetings, so you mentally rehearse responding with calm listening. You anticipate a daunting project and visualize yourself breaking it down into manageable, focused steps. This isn't magical thinking, it is a form of neural priming. You are quite literally building and strengthening the neural pathways that associate those challenging triggers with your chosen, virtuous responses, making it significantly more likely that you will access that better version of yourself when the moment arrives. Consider the transformative potential of dedicating just the first 5 minutes of your day to this ancient ritual. Instead of reaching for your phone and plunging your mind into the agendas and emergencies of others, you could sit upright on the edge of your bed or in a comfortable chair. You could take a few deep breaths to center yourself, then follow the Marcus-Aurelius model. First, bring to mind 1 or 2 specific things you are genuinely grateful for: the warmth of the sun, the comfort of your home, a relationship you value. Then, with a calm and pragmatic mind, think about what this day will likely demand of you. Where might your patience be tested? When will you need courage? How can you practice kindness? This simple 5-minute investment is not a withdrawal from your day. It is the most important deposit you can make into your account of mental strength, ensuring you have the resources to spend wisely when the time comes. Can you hear gratitude in the silence? It's not a sound, of course, but a feeling, one that often gets drowned out by the relentless pursuit of what we don't yet possess. The ancient Stoics believed that true contentment wasn't found in acquiring more, but in fully appreciating what was already present, and they discovered that this profound shift in perspective required a deliberate quieting of both the external and internal world. In the purposeful stillness, away from the shouts of advertising and the whispers of our own endless wanting, we create the perfect conditions for gratitude to grow. It's in this quiet space that we can finally stop comparing our behind the scenes to everyone else's highlight reel, and instead take an honest inventory of the genuine abundance that already fills our lives. Epictetus, who knew the sting of having very little as a former slave, framed this idea with his characteristic clarity. He advised, He is a wise man who does not grieve for the things which he has not, but rejoices for those which he has. This is the very essence of Stoic gratitude, a conscious decision to redirect our attention from absence to presence. It's not about pretending that life is perfect or that we never face lack. It's about refusing to let our happiness be held hostage by the things we don't control. By wanting what we already have, we break the cycle of perpetual dissatisfaction. Our sense of well-being becomes internally generated, a stable foundation that isn't shaken by external circumstances because it's built on the steady ground of appreciation for what is already here, right now. Contrast two ways of spending a spare 10 minutes. In the first, you pick up your phone and begin scrolling through social media. Almost instantly, your brain is bombarded with curated images of exotic vacations, professional announcements, new purchases, and seemingly perfect relationships. The subconscious comparison machine whirs to life, measuring your ordinary life against their extraordinary moments. Without even realizing it, you begin to feel a subtle sense of lack, a feeling that your life is somehow less than. Now imagine a different choice. You set the phone aside and simply sit in silence. You might look out the window or close your eyes, and you bring to mind 3 specific things you feel genuinely grateful for. Perhaps it's the warmth of the sun on your skin, the reliability of a trusted friend, or even the simple fact that you have a comfortable place to sit. In that quiet space, without the noise of comparison, your focus shifts from what's missing to what's present. The feeling that arises isn't one of boastful pride, but of deep, quiet contentment. You aren't adding anything new to your life. You are simply noticing the value of what was already there. This practice of silent gratitude is a direct antidote to the mental weakness of perpetual dissatisfaction. That constant feeling of not enough is a leak in our psychological foundation, draining our energy and leaving us vulnerable to anxiety and envy. When we sit in stillness and actively count our joys, we are patching that leak. We are strengthening our mental resilience by proving to ourselves, again and again, that our peace is not contingent on the next acquisition or achievement. It is available to us in the present moment if we only pause long enough to recognize it. The Stoics weren't advocating for a lack of ambition. They were promoting a state of mind where ambition could come from a place of purposeful growth rather than a feeling of inadequacy. A grateful heart is a full heart, and from that place of fullness we can strive for more without being desperate for it. Why not try this simple but transformative exercise the next time you find yourself feeling a vague sense of discontent? Find a quiet spot away from any screens or distractions. Take 3 slow, deep breaths to settle your mind. Then, in the silence, mentally list 3 things you feel sincerely grateful for. They don't have to be monumental. In fact, the more ordinary, the better. The taste of your morning coffee, the comfort of a well-worn sweater, the sound of rain against the window. As you name each one, sit with the feeling of appreciation for just a moment. Don't rush. Notice how this simple act of directed attention, performed in the quiet, can gently but powerfully recalibrate your entire perspective, replacing a narrative of lack with a tangible experience of abundance. Complaining is noise that weakens the spirit. It might feel satisfying in the moment, a release valve for frustration, but the Stoics saw it for what it truly is, a passive acceptance of circumstances that saps our agency and entrenches a sense of victimhood. Every time we vocalize a grievance without any intention of addressing its root cause, we are essentially rehearsing our own helplessness. We are telling ourselves a story that we are at the mercy of external events, and in doing so, we drain the mental energy that could be channeled into finding a solution or changing our perspective. This isn't about ignoring genuine problems or suppressing valid emotions. It's about recognizing the vast difference between identifying an issue for the purpose of solving it and indulging in complaint for the sake of sympathy or catharsis. The former is an act of empowerment, the latter is an act of surrender. Marcus Aurelius offered a characteristically clear-eyed perspective on this human tendency. He wrote, "Accept the things to which fate binds you, and love the people with whom fate brings you together, but do so with all your heart." At first glance, this might sound like a call for passive resignation, but it's actually the foundation of powerful action. The Stoic acceptance he speaks of is not about liking what happens. It's about clearly seeing reality as it is, without the filter of emotional complaint clouding your judgment. Once you stop complaining about the rain, you can finally remember to open your umbrella. Once you stop lamenting the difficult colleague, you can begin to strategize how to communicate with them more effectively or set better boundaries. Complaining keeps you focused on the problem as an immovable object. Acceptance allows you to see it as a set of conditions within which you can still operate with virtue and purpose. Consider the transformation of someone who decides to break this habit. Imagine a manager who constantly complains about their team's lack of initiative. They vent to other managers, they sigh in frustration during meetings, they carry the weight of their annoyance home every night. This constant complaining reinforces their feeling of being stuck with an incapable team. Now, imagine that manager makes a conscious decision to observe a day of complete verbal silence regarding complaints. The first thing they notice is the sheer volume of their own negative commentary. Then, in the absence of that noise, a space opens up. Instead of complaining that the team doesn't take initiative, they are forced to ask a new set of questions in the quiet of their own mind. Have I clearly delegated authority? Have I created an environment where initiative is rewarded and not punished? What specific training or encouragement might they need? This shift from external complaint to internal inquiry is monumental. It moves the locus of control from outside, my team is the problem, to inside. What is my role in this dynamic, and what can I do about it? The next day, instead of complaining, this manager might call a meeting to collaboratively set new goals or offer a workshop on proactive problem solving. The situation begins to change not because the team magically transformed, but because the manager's approach evolved from futile noise to focused action. This is the ultimate futility that the Stoics warned against, focusing on what's wrong without taking any steps to make it right. It's like repeatedly announcing that your hands are cold while refusing to either put on gloves or build a fire. Your words do nothing to alter your reality. They only serve to amplify your discomfort and convince you of your own powerlessness. Silence, in this context, becomes the necessary void that forces a more productive response. When you deny yourself the easy outlet of complaint, you compel your mind to engage its problem-solving faculties. You start to look for the handle on the situation, the point of leverage that you can actually influence. The challenge then is to become a detective of your own speech. For the next 24 hours, make a conscious pact with yourself to eliminate all verbal complaints. This doesn't mean ignoring problems. It means shifting your language entirely from passive lamentation to active observation or intentional action. When you feel the urge to complain about the long line at the store, simply observe it silently. When you want to gripe about an unfair workload, instead draft a calm, rational email to your supervisor proposing a prioritized list. Notice how often the complaint is a default setting, a noisy habit that masks a simpler choice, either to accept the situation with grace or to take a single, small step toward improving it. This one day of vocal restraint isn't about becoming relentlessly positive. It's about reclaiming the power of your words and discovering that what you choose not to say can be just as transformative as what you do. Nature's silence has always been a Stoic teacher. Long before the constant hum of modern life, the ancient Stoics looked to the natural world not just for resources, but for profound lessons on how to live. They saw in its rhythms the turning of the seasons, the steady flow of a river, the patient growth of a tree, a powerful model for human conduct. This wasn't a mere poetic fancy, it was a core part of their philosophy. They believed that to live in accordance with nature was to live in accordance with reason and virtue, and that required periods of deep, attentive immersion in environments untouched by human hurry and chatter. In the quiet of a forest or the vast stillness of a seashore, they found a clarity that the noisy forums of Rome could never provide, a clarity that realigned their priorities and hushed the trivial anxieties of the ego. Seneca, in his letters, frequently drew upon this theme, urging his friend Lucilius to learn from the natural world. He wrote, "If you wish to have leisure for your mind, either be a poor man or resemble a poor man." The study of wisdom is never a pretender. He then goes on to describe how nature offers itself freely to all, rich and poor alike, as a source of solace and instruction. For Seneca, a walk in the countryside was a form of philosophical retreat. It was a way to step outside the artificial values of society, the obsession with status, wealth, and opinion, and to reconnect with a simpler, more enduring reality. He observed how animals live in the present moment, how plants strive toward the light without complaint, and how the entire cosmos operates on a set of rational, observable laws. This external harmony, he argued, is what we should seek to mirror in our own internal world. By observing nature's silent, purposeful order, we are reminded of our own place within a larger, intelligible whole, and our personal dramas begin to shrink to their proper size. Now compare that ancient practice to a modern concept we might call a digital detox or a retreat into nature. Imagine leaving your phone behind and taking a long walk through a wooded trail. At first, the silence might feel strange, even unsettling. The mind, so accustomed to a barrage of input, might continue its chatter for a while, but then something begins to shift. Your attention is gradually pulled outward, to the intricate pattern of bark on a tree, the complex song of a bird you can't identify, the way the light filters through the canopy. You aren't thinking about your inbox or your social feed, you are simply noticing. This is not a passive emptiness, it is an active, receptive attention. The chaotic swirl of your thoughts begins to settle, much like silt in a pond, leaving the waters of your mind clearer and calmer. This experience is a modern echo of the Stoic retreat. It is a voluntary withdrawal from man-made noise to realign yourself with a slower, more ancient rhythm, one that doesn't care about your deadlines or your social status, but simply endures and persists, offering a powerful lesson in resilience and presence. This raises a simple but revealing question. When was the last time you truly spent an extended period in a natural setting, completely disconnected from your devices? Not just a quick photo op for social media, but a genuine immersion where your only task was to be present. For many of us, it's been too long. We've replaced the deep, restorative silence of the natural world with the shallow, frantic noise of the digital one, and we wonder why we feel so perpetually unmoored. The Stoic invitation is to remember that this teacher is always available, waiting just outside your door. It's in the local park, the community garden, or even the steady rhythm of the rain against your window if you pause to truly listen. In these spaces, we don't just find peace, we find perspective. We remember that we are part of a vast, interconnected system that operates on principles of balance and cycle, and that our own well-being is deeply tied to recognizing and respecting that profound, silent connection. In silence, desires speak loudest and lose their power. This paradox lies at the very heart of Stoic practice. where the act of sitting in stillness isn't about erasing our wants, but about bringing them into the clear light of reason to see them for what they truly are. When we're constantly surrounded by noise, the advertisements telling us we need more, the social pressure to keep up, the internal hum of restless ambition, our desires blend together into a vague, urgent sense of lack. We feel we must have that new gadget, achieve that next milestone, or receive that specific recognition, often without ever pausing to ask a simple but life-changing question. Does this desire serve my virtue, or does it threaten to become my master? It is only in the quiet that we can untangle the knot of wanting, separating genuine needs that support a good life from endless wants that only perpetuate a cycle of striving and dissatisfaction. Epictetus, who understood the corrosive nature of unchecked wanting better than most, offered stark guidance on this matter. He stated, "Freedom is not achieved by satisfying desire, but by eliminating it." At first, this sounds almost inhuman. Aren't desires a natural part of being alive? But Epictetus isn't calling for the end of all aspiration. He is pointing toward a specific kind of desire, the kind that enslaves us. He's talking about the craving for externals, for wealth, status, luxury, or the approval of others, things that are ultimately outside our control. When our happiness becomes contingent on obtaining these things, we hand over the keys to our inner peace to the unpredictable whims of fortune. We become like a dog tied to a cart, as the Stoics were fond of saying, forced to run wherever it goes. By limiting these desires, by examining them in the quiet and consciously deciding which ones are worthy of our energy, we aren't diminishing our lives, we are reclaiming our sovereignty. We switch from being pulled by the cart to choosing our own direction. Imagine a scenario many of us can relate to: the intense, almost itching desire for a specific new piece of technology. Perhaps it's the latest smartphone. In the noise of daily life, this desire builds. You see ads for it, read reviews, watch unboxing videos. The thought of it becomes a constant background hum. It feels like acquiring this object will somehow make life smoother, more complete, more impressive. Then you create a space of silence. You sit without distraction and actually examine this desire. You ask yourself the Stoic questions: why do I want this? Is it for a practical need, or for the feeling I believe it will provide? Will it truly contribute to my character or my peace, or is it about status and a temporary hit of dopamine? In that quiet, you might realize your current phone functions perfectly well. The desire begins to shift from a compelling need to a simple preference, and then even further, into a recognition that the lasting joy you seek cannot be found in a piece of hardware. The object itself hasn't changed, but your relationship to the desire for it has been completely transformed. It loses its power over you because you have seen its true size, and it is small. This process of quiet examination is how we break the chain of attachment that leads to so much of our suffering. We suffer not because we don't get what we want, but because we are attached to the outcome of getting it. We pin our hopes, our identity, and our sense of worth to a future possession or achievement. Silence creates the necessary distance to see this attachment clearly. It allows us to hold the desire in our open palm rather than clutching it in a white-knuckled fist. We can look at it, understand its origins, and then consciously decide if it's a path we wish to follow or a weight we wish to set down. This isn't a one-time event, but a continual practice of mental decluttering, ensuring that our actions are driven by intentional choice rather than by unconscious craving. What is one desire that has been quietly occupying your thoughts lately? It might be the desire for a promotion, for a different car, for a relationship to change, or even for a particular experience. The next time you have a few moments of quiet, bring this specific desire to mind. Don't fight it or judge it, simply observe it with calm curiosity. Notice the sensations it creates in your body. Listen to the stories your mind tells about why you need it. Then gently ask yourself, if I never obtained this, what would I truly lose? Would my capacity for virtue, for joy, for connection be diminished? You may find that under the quiet gaze of your own awareness, the desire begins to soften and change shape, revealing itself not as a key to your happiness, but as a passing cloud in the vast sky of your mind. How do you quiet your mind before sleep? For many of us, the final hour of the day is anything but silent. It's a last-minute scramble to catch up on emails, scroll through social media, or binge-watch a show, effectively flooding our brains with stimulation right up until the moment we try to shut them down. The Stoics recognized this as a profound mistake, a surefire way to sabotage the very rest we need to face the next day with clarity and resilience. They believed that the transition into sleep wasn't a simple light switch to be flipped off, but a sacred bridge between the day's activities and the mind's essential recovery period. To cross that bridge peacefully required a deliberate practice of winding down, of replacing the day's noise with a purposeful, reflective quiet that would allow the mind to process, release, and truly prepare for rejuvenation. Seneca, in his letters, emphasized the importance of this nightly reckoning. He wrote, "When the light has been removed and my wife has fallen silent, aware of this habit that's now mine, I examine my entire day and go back over what I've done and said." This wasn't an exercise in self-criticism or anxious rumination. It was a calm, judicial review. He would assess his actions against his stated principles, acknowledging where he had acted with virtue and where he had fallen short, all without drama or self-flagellation. The goal was learning, not judgment. By confronting his missteps calmly in the quiet of the evening, he prevented them from morphing into the stuff of midnight anxiety. He could essentially file the day away, having learned its lessons, and enter sleep with a clear conscience and an unburdened mind. This practice of meditatio, of evening meditation, was how the Stoics ensured that their sleep was truly restorative, not just a continuation of the day's chaos in the form of fitful dreams and restless thoughts. Now contrast this ancient wisdom with a standard modern pre-sleep ritual. Lying in bed, illuminated by the blue glow of a smartphone, endlessly scrolling through an infinite stream of news, updates, and curated images of other people's lives. This activity is the psychological opposite of the Stoic review. Instead of turning inward to process your own day, you are pouring more external, often emotionally charged, information into your mind. Instead of calming the nervous system, you are stimulating it with the light and content that trigger alertness. Instead of filing the day's events away, you are adding to the pile, ensuring your subconscious has a much larger, more disorganized workload to sift through as you sleep. The result is often a mind that, even in rest, cannot fully disengage, leading to a less deep, less restorative sleep, and waking up feeling already behind, as if the mental treadmill never stopped. Establishing a wind-down routine without screens is perhaps one of the most immediately impactful ways to integrate stoic silence into your life. This doesn't have to be an hour-long ceremony. It can begin with just 20 minutes. It might involve brewing a cup of caffeine-free tea and sitting quietly with it, allowing your thoughts to settle without the pressure of doing anything with them. It could be reading a few pages of a physical book, not for productivity, but for the slow, focused engagement that pulls you out of your own concerns and into a different world. For some, it might be a few minutes of very gentle stretching, focusing on the breath and the release of physical tension, or simply jotting down 3 things from the day that you learned or for which you are grateful. The specific activity matters less than the quality of attention it requires, deliberate, slow, and minimally stimulating. This creates a buffer zone between the noise of the day and the silence of the night, allowing your brainwaves to gradually slow down and synchronize with the rhythm of rest, making the journey into sleep not a crash but a gentle descent. True empathy begins when we stop speaking and start hearing. We often mistake the act of waiting for our turn to talk with genuine listening, but the Stoics recognized a profound distinction. For them, the virtue of justice, which encompasses our duty to others, required a radical shift from broadcasting our own perspective to actively receiving another's. This deep understanding isn't achieved through clever questioning or voluble agreement, but through the disciplined, quiet attention that creates a sacred space for another person's truth to emerge unfiltered and unshaped by our own ego. In that intentional silence, we are not passively absent. We are fully, actively present, setting aside our internal commentary to make room for the raw material of another human being's experience. This practice directly counters the self-absorption that so often masquerades as conversation, allowing us to connect with the universal humanity that binds us all rather than the superficial differences that divide. Marcus Aurelius touched on this core idea of shared human experience in his Meditations, reminding himself to accustom yourself not to be inattentive to what another person says, and as far as possible enter into his mind. He understood that this act of mental entry was a form of respect and a cornerstone of living in accordance with nature. He frequently reflected on the fact that all people are united by a common capacity for reason, a shared vulnerability to pain and desire, and the same fundamental yearning for happiness and peace. When we truly listen in silence, we are not just hearing words, we are bearing witness to this shared condition. We begin to see the other person not as a character in our own story, but as the protagonist of their own, with a complex inner world of motivations, fears, and hopes that are as vivid and valid as our own. This Stoic perspective dismantles the illusion of separation, replacing judgment with a calm, compassionate curiosity. We can see this principle embodied with exquisite skill in the practice of a seasoned therapist. A good therapist knows that the most healing moments often occur not in the advice they give, but in the profound silence they hold. When a client is struggling to articulate a deep pain or a confusing emotion, the therapist's choice to remain quiet, to not jump in with reassurance, interpretation, or a story of their own, sends a powerful message. That silence says, "I can hold this space for you. Your experience is important enough to be heard completely. Take your time. I am not afraid of your pain or your silence." In that void, the client often finds the courage to voice something they didn't even know they felt. The therapist, by listening not just to the words but to the pauses, the hesitations, and the emotions behind them, gains a far deeper understanding than any rapid-fire questioning could ever yield. They are practicing a professional form of the Stoic art of withholding immediate judgment, allowing the full picture to develop in the quiet. This practice of receptive silence has transformative power far beyond the therapist's office. Imagine a couple having a disagreement. The common pattern is a tense volley of statements and counterstatements, each person rehearsing their defense while the other speaks. Now imagine one person makes a different choice. They decide to simply listen. They quiet their own internal rebuttals and focus entirely on understanding the feeling and the need behind their partner's words. In that silence, something shifts. The partner, feeling truly heard, often softens. The listener, freed from the pressure to defend, might hear a valid concern they had previously missed. The conflict ceases to be a battle to be won and becomes a shared problem to be understood. The silence becomes a bridge built not of words but of attention and respect. Your next conversation is an opportunity to practice this ancient, empathetic art. Whether you're speaking with a coworker, a child, or a friend, challenge yourself to a new level of listening. Make it your sole goal to understand their point of view without formulating a response. When they pause, resist the urge to immediately fill the space. Notice the impulse to interrupt with your own similar experience and gently set it aside. Instead, try simply nodding or offering a small sound of acknowledgement to show you are following. You may be astonished at what you hear when you stop focusing on what you will say next. You might hear the subtle anxiety behind a colleague's confident proposal or the unspoken excitement in your child's rambling story. This is where true connection lies, not in the noise of our own opinions, but in the quiet, generous space we create for others. Silence doesn't require hours, just moments of intention woven into the fabric of your day. In our relentless pursuit of productivity and connection, we often overlook the transformative potential of these small, intentional gaps. The ancient Stoics didn't have the luxury of week-long silent retreats. They were statesmen, soldiers, and busy citizens who discovered that mental vigilance was built not in grand gestures, but in the consistent micro-practices of pause and awareness. This is about reclaiming the spaces between things, the breath between tasks, the quiet walk from your car to the office, the 60 seconds before a meeting begins. These are not empty moments to be filled, but opportunities to fortify your mind, to check your impressions, and to return to your center before the next demand arrives. Epictetus, who focused intensely on the practical application of philosophy, gave us a perfect lens for this. He reminded us to focus on making the best use of what is in our power, and our attention is the most fundamental thing we truly own. We cannot control the flood of emails, the unexpected delays, or the moods of others, but we can absolutely control how we steward the tiny spaces between these events. Choosing to insert a moment of silence is the ultimate exercise of this power. It is a conscious decision to withdraw a scent from the chaotic stream of external stimuli and instead anchor yourself in the sovereign territory of your own mind, if only for a few precious seconds. This isn't about adding another item to your overwhelming to-do list. It's about changing the quality of the attention you bring to the list itself. Consider the potent effect of a micro moment of silence strategically placed before a potentially stressful interaction. You're about to pick up the phone to call a dissatisfied client. Instead of diving straight in, you take just 30 seconds. You sit back in your chair, you feel your feet on the floor, and you take 3 conscious breaths. In that tiny window of quiet, you are not solving the client's problem. You are solving your own internal state. You are discharging the anticipatory anxiety, clearing the mental clutter of your previous task, and creating a small reservoir of calm from which you can now respond with patience and clarity, rather than react from a place of defensiveness or stress. That half-minute investment doesn't delay the solution. It ensures the solution you offer comes from your best self, not your most rattled one. These practices can be seamlessly integrated without disrupting the flow of a demanding day. A mindful pause between tasks is as simple as closing your eyes for 1 full minute after sending an email before you open the next tab. A quiet walk means leaving your phone in your pocket during your lunchtime stroll, consciously noticing the sensation of the air on your skin and the rhythm of your steps instead of listening to a podcast. Even the act of sipping a cup of coffee can become a silent ritual if you do it with full attention to the warmth of the mug and the flavor of the drink, rather than scanning headlines on your screen. The goal is to insert these tiny islands of quiet reflection throughout the river of your day, preventing the current from sweeping you away entirely. The true test of any philosophy is its application, so here is a direct and manageable challenge. Tomorrow, before the noise of the world fully takes hold, consciously schedule 3 specific silent pauses into your calendar. Don't leave it to chance, perhaps one for 5 minutes first thing in the morning with your tea before you check any devices. another for 60 seconds before you begin your afternoon work. A final one for 2 minutes in the evening as a transition from your professional duties to your personal time. Guard these appointments with yourself as you would an important meeting with someone you respect. Observe what arises in those moments: the initial restlessness, the urge to reach for distraction, and then the gradual settling. Notice the subtle but real difference it makes in your focus, your patience, and your resilience throughout the day. This is how silence shifts from an abstract concept to a living, breathing tool for mental strength, one intentional moment at a time. Throughout this journey, we've explored how the ancient Stoics turned silence into a sophisticated early warning system for the mind. It was never about emptiness or escape for them, but about creating a sacred space for vigilant attention, a space where the faintest whispers of fear, desire, anger, or distraction could be detected long before they escalated into full-blown crises. This practice of intentional quiet exposes our mental weaknesses not to shame us, but to empower us. It allows us to see the hairline cracks in our foundation so we can mend them with reason and virtue, building a resilience that is proactive rather than reactive. By consistently turning down the volume of the world, we cultivate a profound clarity that cuts through the noise of cognitive biases and external pressures, allowing us to discern what is truly within our control and act from a place of unwavering principle. We've revisited the core themes that make this alarm system so effective: the power of presence, which anchors us in the reality of the current moment instead of the imagined tragedies of the future; the practice of detachment, which allows us to observe our thoughts and impressions without immediately being enslaved by them; the courage of self-examination, where we honestly audit our judgment and motivations in the clear light of reason; and the timeless Stoic practices from morning meditation to voluntary discomfort that train our minds to find strength in stillness. These are not mere historical curiosities. They are practical, accessible tools for anyone feeling overwhelmed by the relentless pace and pressure of modern life. They offer a way to reclaim sovereignty over your inner world, to build an inner citadel that remains unshaken by external storms. Marcus Aurelius, who governed an empire from the eye of his own mental hurricane, left us with a timeless reminder of where this strength originates. He wrote, "Nowhere can you find a more peaceful, less busy retreat than in your own soul." This is the ultimate invitation to discover that the most reliable refuge, the most powerful alarm system, and the wisest counsel have been within you all along, waiting patiently beneath the layers of daily distraction. It is a peace that does not depend on perfect circumstances, but on the disciplined practice of turning inward, so we end not with a finale, but with a beginning. The true measure of these ideas lies not in understanding them, but in applying them. I encourage you to start small. Embrace just a few minutes of deliberate silence today. Whether it's a quiet moment with your morning coffee, a mindful walk without headphones, or a purposeful pause before you respond to a provoking email, treat it as an experiment. See what you notice, see what shifts. This leads us to one final, deeply personal question, a question that only you can answer through your own experience. What will you hear when you finally listen? Will it be the quiet hum of your own resilience, the calming rhythm of your breath, or perhaps the gentle, guiding voice of your own reason, which has been speaking all along, waiting for the noise to stop so it could finally be heard? I'd love to hear what you discover. Share your experiences, your challenges, or your moments of clarity in the comments below. Let's continue this conversation and learn from each other's journeys into the quiet.